Hi. Trains. Awesome. Even more awesome if you live very close to the train station. If I leave the house, I'm going to be at the train station in like 1 or 2 minutes, and then I can take the train, don't have to wait for anything, and I'm on my way to the city. But where's the problem then? The problem lies in the case that about 20% of the time, I leave my house, walk to the train station, and then there's no train. And it's either delayed or it's cancelled, and it's annoying. I would have to look at the app every time before I leave the house, and I think it's also annoying. And to not do all that annoying stuff of checking the phone or just waiting at the train station, we're going to build a device which does that for us so that I can press a button, see everything, and leave the house when I definitely know the train will come. But before we make something cool, we have to make something. I usually approach a problem one minimal requirement at a time and work myself up from there. So let's start with the hardware. The brain of the device is an ESP32. It's a microcontroller, like something that controls your microwave, but also capable of a bit more, like Wi-Fi, which is essential for the project as we get our departure information from the internet. The only other part we absolutely need is a screen. To match the screen on the railway track, I chose this white LCD screen with a blue background. Currently, I power the ESP32 through USB-C and use a separate power source for the screen. Of course, our aggregated stuff now needs to know what it should do. So we need software. To get the real-time departure information, I'm using an API, short for Application Programming Interface, which lets me get a bunch of information by doing one simple request across the internet. From the request, I receive a file I can parse and extract the departure times that I need. To send the correct request, we have to read the documentation of the API or experiment with something I found very useful, an API playground. This allowed me to see the correct call I have to make and find out the ID of my specific station. With this, the first prototype is done. I am sending a request to query which trains and buses are leaving my specific train station and at what time, and displaying the difference between the current time and the departure. Great. I have produced barely usable garbage and can pat myself on the shoulder as not many of my ideas reach this stage at all. Now come the upgrades. First, we get a bigger screen. Then, we fix the direction problem. I live in the outskirts of Berlin, meaning I almost never take the train further out. But when querying, I get the results for both directions. So, ideally, I would only display trains leaving in the direction of the city center. The first option to solve that problem would be to filter the destination, but this fails due to the fact that sometimes intermediate stations become the new destinations in case of a disturbance in schedule. And filtering for every intermediate station further in seems like a ridiculous idea. So I tried the second option, which is not to query all departures from my station, but to query with a trip in mind from my station to the next station. This ensures that all the trains are traveling into the city and even excludes the occasional bus on the departure list. The last big thing I want to fix in software, I promise, is language. Ü, Ä, Ö. You might think I'm insane, but these are some of the German letters I have to draw and insert into the code manually, as the original LCD library was incapable of interpreting them and made them Japanese. I then had to parse each list of characters and replace the weird German letters with my new custom characters. Now it actually works, but I would still never use it. It got two cables, which is annoying to plug in, is always on when plugged in, and it doesn't look nice. To fix the cable problem, we upgrade our tiny ESP32 board to another ESP32 board capable of powering devices that require 5 volts, like our LCD screen. I know after building it, I realized that I could also use the smaller ESP32.
So, while I'm soldering, I wanted to talk about why this project is important to me and why I'm doing it in the first place. Yeah, I mean, the simple explanation would be I wanted something that's kind of useful in my life and I can do like some experimentation with devices, screens, Wi Fi, electronics, and whatever. But the more complex answer is actually that I really, really want this specific device. And it kind of stems from my history with trains. I grew up in some sort of center in Berlin, where all the trains were like kind of redundant, or all the public transport was redundant. So when something wasn't working, something else was working. And I really loved taking the public transport because it was always easy, it was always fast. Obviously, as a kid, I definitely didn't have a driver's license, and trains or just public transport was kind of enabling me to visit friends and to not rely on somebody with a car, which was amazing. So I do really love trains, but as I grew older, I eventually had to move out, and I moved out to a place that was cheaper, meaning it was definitely not in the center of Berlin. And that had its toll on my commute to university. Instead of like taking half an hour there, I need like 1 or 1.5 hours, depending on how the train goes. And that's like the moment where I started to be like very dependent on a system that just doesn't work as great or as reliable as it should work. Yeah, and that's like ultimately the reason why I'm making this device. I know it won't make the train magically come or don't get delayed or don't get cancelled, but it makes my life a bit easier in that regard around a topic that's become very frustrating and annoying in my life. And like functionally, you could say it's useless because I can still look at my phone or whatever, but it makes me feel a little bit better about it. And this little device will hopefully make me feel really good. Okay, this sounds this sounds weird. We have to get back to the video. So yeah, so prepare to get jump scared by myself in 3, 2, 1.
To fix the always on problem, we could add another circuit specifically designed for that, but I didn't want to make it more complex, so I just cut the cable and added a switch which I can flip to turn the power either on or off. It was my first time doing something like this, and one thing I could have known beforehand is that cutting the entire cable is such a dumb idea. Not only did I have to solder in the switch, which I had to do anyway, but I also had to solder every other cable for no particular reason. And now let's make it beautiful. I plan to hang this in my entryway permanently, so I'm really invested in making it look nice. Okay, so let's talk about design. I always find it quite fascinating when somebody shows the design and explains the different processes that they went through thinking about it and reasoning why they did certain decisions. Obviously, design is like not a science, it's whatever you want to do, but I still find it quite interesting when somebody gives like reasons for why they did something, because then I can maybe include some of them in my own designs. And so I'm talking about my first prototype and then my finished product. This is the first prototype. I'm not a huge fan of how it looks, like color-wise and with the hyper filleted edges. Um, Here's how it looks. But I'm a huge fan of the shape. This is what I wanted to be certain when I was designing this prototype and to figure out whether I even like this shape. And there's a reason why I picked this shape. I could have just taken like the LCD screen and put it like flat on like one wall and then thought, okay, now I need space for my ESP32 and then put it also flat here. and make it as flat as possible, and have the footprint of the device be like as small as possible, which I sometimes really appreciate, but for this case, it just didn't fit. So I wanted to do a design that kind of mimics how bus and train signs work and how they're structured, because I really wanted to give like the feeling that it is like a real train sign. The idea was that I want to have a sign that hangs somewhere. And I was thinking for a long time, what if I make like a sign and then have like a small path to like a bigger body where it like hangs from? And whenever I was like imagining it and thinking about it or sketching it, it always came to me like it always looked fragile to me, because like there's a small plastic part that holds the whole sign, which of course works in real life because it's metal. It's not that important aesthetically speaking, but for me it kind of looked off. If I have like a small plastic part, that's the only part that holds the screen on some bigger body. But I still wanted to get the feeling that my screen hangs off somewhere. So I made a bigger body and just attached the screen to it, but didn't make it like all one singular big piece, and put the screen like here in the front. And I think it gives like a nice feeling that this is like not, the screen is not the full body and that it is just attached to something bigger, which holds all the components. I don't know, maybe it's all just BS, but with design, it's always kind of the case where you kind of have to go in on the BS. If it looks good or if you like how it looks, then you did something right. And I like the shape. My second prototype and final version obviously looks way better. I'll show you soon. Here's like one thing I wanted to figure out from this prototype as well, is how I'm going to attach the switches, because I love mechanical switches and I think they would be a great fit, but I didn't want the whole switch to protrude from this box. So if you can see, yeah, I think this would look kind of off if I have the box here, and then on top of the box I would have the switch. And I think it would be a bit too much, or even if it's just a bit less, I think it's still a bit too much for the size of this box. And this looks kind of off, but I still wanted to see the metal switches. So I made something where I can put them in. I have another close-up shot of that. Here. So I have it like this, which I think looks way better. I don't like how these holes look. I think, like you can see, they're a bit see-through, but I like how these switches look. And what didn't work at all was attaching these switches to the case, because I designed it in such a way that you have to put a nut in and then you have to spin the nut inside of this little cubby. And I found that to be very hard to do and also almost impossible to get the switch then properly attached to the case. So I redesigned that. The couple of changes that I did from this prototype to the next one is making all of it transparent. So I tried my best to get transparent filament and to try to print it transparent, which wasn't easy. I was trying different settings. So I tried to print with 100% in a infill. That means all solid plastic, which didn't look good. Then I tried it with infill anyway, which looked horrible. And then I tried it without infill, which means I have no inner supporting plastic structure, which made it weaker, but I liked the look best. So I chose to print it with a transparent filament with 0% infill. Then I removed the front fillets because they don't fit. Then I also redesigned the mechanism to attach these switches, because otherwise this is not going to work. And I added some color. Now I have to make sure it works, put everything together. One thing I've also learned is that heat set inserts are awesome. I still love them, but I have to really, really take into account how I'm putting them in. So I had some cases where they are really, really hard to reach, and that was kind of annoying. So next design I'm doing, I'm planning that the heatset inserts are easier to reach when putting them in. I don't know if I'll hold the promise, but this is one thing that I plan to do better in the next designs.
While you're watching the building montage, let me talk about anime. I know it's a bit off topic, but it's my video, so I'm doing it anyway. And there's a reason I wanted to talk about it. I've watched a lot of shows, but I'm typically not the type of person to recommend shows to other people, especially if they don't watch anime. But I had a conversation with some of my friends, and it sparked a thought that a lot of anime are kind of cringe, and I think I've just grown resistant to like some kind of cringe. Not to all. There are still shows that even I can't watch. But it sparked the thought that I can just look around, that I can maybe compile a list of shows that I don't think are cringe and that I can safely recommend to people who don't watch anime if somebody asked me for a recommendation. I still wouldn't walk around and recommend shows, but maybe here on YouTube is still a good case of it. And I went through every show that I've watched and tried to compile a good list. I tried to avoid like some, oh, we will win with the power of friendship shows, or I tried to avoid the severely sexualizing shows or any sexualizing shows because I think that would be embarrassing to recommend that. Afterwards, I had like a couple of shows, a couple of candidates, and the two candidates that remained were Monster, which I found really good. It's an old anime about a doctor saving someone's life. Then the person whose life was saved turns out to be somebody who kills people. And so the doctor feels responsible for chasing him around and killing him. I mean, the plot in itself is not the craziest one, but the characters are really good. And it's like a really clean show that doesn't feel like an anime. But it's pretty old and it has 72 episodes. So I put it on the back of my list because I think recommending someone who doesn't watch a lot of anime, something with 72 episodes, is just mean. And so I found a second show, which is pretty good, and it is 91 Days. I've recently watched it again and rewatched it with my partner just to make sure that it doesn't have anything that's like embarrassing to recommend or whatever. And I think I'm pretty sure 91 Days is now my go-to show to recommend to people who don't watch anime if they want to start watching. 91 Days is a show about a young boy who witnesses how his family is murdered by the mafia because they're also a member of the mafia. It's not too unfair. And he survives and wants revenge. It's pretty simple. Like the premise is boy wants revenge, but I think it's a very bittersweet show. And what I really like about the show is the humor, because it is incredibly funny sometimes, but also the balance with the serious scenes that are taken seriously. And the humor is also not like slapstick comedy, but it's just like good writing. And what kind of complements everything, the funny things and the serious things, are the characters. They're super entertaining to watch. almost all of them are somewhat likable, although it's like a mafia story where you have like a lot of enemies and not everybody survives in the end. So, I don't know, it was kind of nice, and I just wanted to talk about a show I would like to recommend. And I still have some other shows that I can recommend afterwards, or some other shows I could recommend if people don't like 91 Days. But yeah, I don't know, I just wanted to talk about it. And if you have watched the show, please write your thoughts in the comments. I would be very interested.
Hi, hello, it's Michael from the future. Yeah, so since then it's been about 2 months of almost daily use. I just turned on whenever I know I'm leaving the house in the morning, and it works. I like it, and I still use it regularly. That's all I wanted to say. If you enjoyed watching there's one extra feature I probably haven't told you about. It's this one. You can now see the trains leaving from my station, but if I flip the switch, you can see the trains leaving from the train station of my partner's work. So whenever they leave work, we call, and while talking, I can just switch this on and tell them how much time they have until their train comes. So, yeah, if you enjoyed watching the video, then great. Maybe let me know. You don't have to. But you're in luck because I'm doing another one sometime this year. Okay, bye.